Hello and welcome to the new Ashla Podcast. Today we continue the episode that we left you with last week, Nourishing Your Whole Being, the Path of Fulfillment. This will be part 2 as we explore the 12 agreements that we teach in our academy, at our temple, and these 12 agreements, or virtues, as many of you would call them. So I just want to catch you guys up from last episode. Oh, I'm joined by my student and co-host, Michael Perry.
Hey, guys.
Michael and Heather and I, we explored the importance of nourishing the mind, body, and spirit through virtues, which we call agreements. Things like compassion, integrity, righteousness. The 4 that we went through last week are responsibility, respect, family, and patience. If you haven't checked that episode out, please go to that episode, listen to that one, and then come back right back to this one, because you'll have more context and you'll be like, what are they talking about? We also discussed kind of a holistic approach to life, because for us, holistic is the only way to really truly experience life in all its aspects, mind, body, spirit. And for those of you who do the 4th one, emotional, it's really important to sync those as we navigate life. Sometimes it's hard, but that's kind of the point, or that's kind of the goal, I should say, is to take the holistic approach to things.
It's the truth. I mean, there's so much when it comes to analyzing ourselves, our lives, and how we want to show up in the world, that just a holistic approach really helps us step out of ourselves and look at things objectively and make changes in ways we may not have considered before.
Right, because it's a very unbalanced approach to existence. You miss things, and I know it's one of those things, like many things we say on this podcast, easier said than done, but it is possible, I promise you. We're already partway there. We're all interconnected to each other. We're all interconnected to everything in the universe. And there is this innate interconnectedness of our mind, our body, and our spirit. So, like I said, we delved into the 12 agreements, and we hit those 4. But because there's so much to talk about with these, this is part 2. We'll be talking about, what 4 are we talking about today?
Today we'll be going over courage, justice, mercy, and faith.
Really, really tough ones. Really powerful ones, though, too. Before we get started, I want to encourage everybody to check out our Facebook pages, check out our TikTok, check out our YouTube pages. You can find all those links underneath our show description. And remember, we do post new episodes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Courage. Michael, when you first jumped into this path, you really did jump into it. You took that leap of faith, and faith we'll talk about later, which is important here too. But how big of a role did you think courage would play when you started learning the teachings?
So I think courage is one of the most imperative virtues we can have when we go through things. Now, courage, as we've said before, courage is not the absence of fear, but courage in the face of it. For many people who start on this path, we have the potential to start on this path without having to go through turmoil in our lives. But most of us learn the hard way, and it's when we're thrust into the unknown and into darkness are we confronted with truly changing our lives and becoming more than we were to weather the storm. And courage was so necessary, especially in the beginning, because when you're sitting in that darkness, when you're starting to question yourself and your motives and what drives you, being able to be honest with yourself can be so difficult when it's so foreign to you. And that's a big part of where courage comes in, is the courage to be disliked, the courage to not be as perfect as we once thought we were. Before I started this path, before I hit that dark night of the soul, I thought I was a pretty perfect guy. Like, I didn't think I had really any issues I needed to work on. Yeah, I had a few insecurities, but it wasn't anything I was concerned about because I knew how to flow through life the way I did. And when you start sitting and having the courage to look at yourself and realizing so much of what you show the world are social masks, the more it becomes scary when you start realizing you're not as great as you thought you were. And so, just to talk about the beginning of the journey, that's a huge part. And there's so much courage needed as you undergo the transformation of this journey, because as you start to learn these things about yourself and you start taking these actionable steps to change the way you show up in the world. As we've talked about the survival instincts, fight, flight, and freeze. And when you get put in those situations, I mean, growth happens when you are confronted with something that you've had an automated response to, like those things, and being able to work your way through them and handle these situations differently. It takes courage to not shut down. It takes courage not to get into fight mode. It takes courage to humble yourself and have a conversation instead of trying to just fix things or to push your perspective across.
Yeah, when I wrote these parts of the teachings, courage was the fuel that drove all of these other agreements. Faith was the vehicle, but courage is the fuel that propels us forward. And as you said, courage is not the absence of fear, but more like the ability to act despite it. It's that fire that burns within us when we stand for what is right, when we defend those or do things for people who just can't. Courage helps us do that for them, despite what's in front of us. Courage reflects our heart's determination to overcome adversity. Courage is probably one of those virtues that we see a lot in pop culture. Every comic book, every movie, it just seems like courage is on display, and it's kind of the main thing that drives our heroes and take this. They're just fearless. They're courageous. But courage is also a more passive thing. It's not necessarily standing up and punching the bad guys. It's standing up for what you believe in. It's being able to accept consequences for doing the right thing.
It is to do what is right and not what is easy.
Yeah, exactly.
And by doing that, especially standing up for others, you model that to other people and it gives them strength. And in those moments, those are probably the most character defining moments you will have in your lives when you choose courage over your normal programming.
As if it is, you can change that. Every fork in the road, every life changing, path determining thing that I've ever had to choose required courage to choose for me. And I suspect that's probably true for everyone for the most part. Sometimes we go on faith, but it takes courage to take that leap of faith. Courage is kind of this thing that's always there for those of us who seek to grow, because growing hurts and growing is hard. And especially when you go in and out of your dark night of the soul eras and issues and parts of your growth and path. They come and go.
Completely. And it's in those, again, like I said, for me, I mean, most of us, we don't choose this path till we are in the darkness. But that is when we start going on this path in that darkness, we start to cultivate that courage. It's like willpower. It's not something that I'm going to be courageous today. It is momentum. It is cultivating the ability to be courageous more and more in the areas where we struggle with that.
So let's try to understand courage. Let's think of courage as strength within vulnerability. Let's start there. It requires us to acknowledge fear without letting it control us. That's really when this true strength arises, when we face our vulnerability and embrace that as a source of power because we have courage pushing us forward. What do you think about strength and vulnerability?
I think that strength is one of the most misunderstood things out there in this world we live in. We talk about strength. I think one great example of this is a lot of the toxic masculinity that goes around, where so many men feel the need to shoulder all the burdens of the family, to not talk about their problems, to not have any complaints, and to always do what is right. And it's an unrealistic expectation that wears people down. True strength is the ability to admit when we are struggling. It is the ability to be vulnerable and show ourselves as we are, as flawed human beings, because through that vulnerability can we create true connections and true community within our families and within our peers, because when we can do that, it allows other people to meet us halfway, to help us not lean too much on ourselves, because we are all talented and skilled in many areas in life, but we can't be a one size fits all kind of person, because when we try to do that, we create a lot of self-doubt. We create a lot of challenges where we're not utilizing people in our lives who could be of assistance to us. And I know that sounds bad, but everyone wants to play a part. Everyone wants to be involved. And when you try to take too much on yourself, you rob other people of the opportunity to grow themselves. And so I think vulnerability and strength go hand in hand, because only someone who is truly honest and vulnerable, and this doesn't mean complaining and being nitpicky, it just means being honest about your emotions, being honest about your struggles, because there are people in your life who would love to support you through those moments. And when you rob them of that chance, you also rob them of the ability to grow a deeper connection with you, and you in turn with them.
There's a quote that I love to go to when I'm thinking about courage, especially for people who go their whole lives under the illusion that they've never exhibited courage, or that courage eludes them and they just kind of let things happen. It's a quote by Maya Angelou. She said, "One isn't necessarily born with courage, but one is born with potential. Without courage, we cannot practice any other virtue with consistency. We can't always be kind, true, merciful, generous, or honest." And it's very true. As I said, courage is the fuel that drives all of these other agreements or virtues that we practice and teach. You can't be consistent without courage. You can't always be kind. You can't always be truthful. You can't always be merciful. You can't always be generous. And you certainly can't always be honest, because if fear is there and not courage, then you're going to compromise. You will compromise your kindness, and you fall into this idea that the ends justify the means. Or you will tell a lie because you're scared of the reaction of the person that you're speaking to. Or you find it hard to be merciful because without courage, standing up for what's right, then you're just following orders. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, one thing I want to add to what you're saying there, too, that is so true is I was someone who was always so positive. I didn't let anything get me down. I was always happy. I was always doing what I could for others. And that sacrifice, when you sacrifice your own authenticity, which is whatever emotions you're feeling, your own needs, when you are trying to provide for everyone else, you will lose yourself, and you will lose your own self-worth, because your self-worth does not come out from outside validation. It comes from being able to validate your own existence and your own needs, and to make those a priority in your life. So just something to think about for some of those of you out there who struggle with that. It's important to learn to put yourself first in almost any situation, unless it's absolutely necessary.
But you have to have the courage to do that too, because
Yeah.
because you are employing courage to make a choice, even if that is to step away and get help, or get somebody that can, or to let someone you love suffer a little bit because they need to learn this lesson. That all requires courage. It really does.
There's nothing more heartbreaking than watching someone just destroy themselves, and know there's nothing you can do until they're ready to change that. That was
It
deep.
but it's true. Courage is the favorite virtue of all people, because when we see it, it just lights us up. It gives us hope. It gives us a place to put our faith. Courage courage is so powerful because it is necessary for every other good thing that you will ever do. You can't do it for long without courage. Courage is the most popular and most widely taught of all the virtues across the board, as I've said. These examples are everywhere. We can read, we can watch, we can hear, we can witness. Does this make it the most important of it? Not necessarily the most important, because they all have their own importance, but it definitely has to be there in some capacity or other, or it just doesn't work, right?
I mean, again, one thing we brought up in the last episode, you'll see how all of these agreements interchange with one another, because they are the building blocks of a strong character. You heard Justin within that talk about faith and mercy and justice and how it lights us up. And it's because we admire the traits we want to cultivate within ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We admire the strength we want to cultivate within ourselves.
Yeah. And some people just seem to be just more naturally courageous than others. I promise you, they weren't born that way. They went through a lot of stuff and figured that out. And they realized that they always had to be courage. It requires courage to survive, but it also requires courage to thrive. to feel like, you're worth it, you deserve it. And we also have to recognize for us in our teachings that courage is something more than just a condition that we can see. We see somebody who's big, who looks big and strong, we just assume they're courageous. We see somebody who always speaks their mind no matter what, and sometimes in not a great way, but we see that as being courageous. We see people who aren't afraid to stand up for others as courageous. All these wonderful examples. Courage needs to become, for those on this path, and just to live a good, healthy life. Courage needs to be more than just these things. Courage needs to be incorporated into everything holistically. You must be physically courageous. You must be mentally courageous. You must be spiritually courageous and emotionally courageous. You do. As we strive to be more complete in our lives, and by that I mean incorporating mind, body, emotion, spirit into everything we do, then we must recognize that courage as a state of being, not the act of courage. We have acts of courage, but we must start to recognize it as a state of being for the whole self, all of them.
And again, this isn't a race. When it comes to cultivating courage, when it comes to becoming these things, some people are more naturally attuned, but most of them, 95% of them, 98% of them, they went through things that helped them cultivate that strength to get to that place. So be gentle with yourself and don't compare yourself to others. The more you practice it, the better you will get. And it's not going to be pretty at first if you're someone who's afraid of conflict or struggles with this. But the more you practice, the stronger you will get. It's all working the muscles of the mind, working the muscles of the soul.
Man, your life turns around. People stop testing you. People stop trying to deceive you. People stop because it comes out of you in everything you do. It's like, here's a guy who's confident, but also courageous. It requires a lot of courage to be confident all the time. Being mindful of our flaws, but also being confident in spite of those. Not because you just ignore them, but because you've worked through those and you've realized that, hey, I've done all I can for these flaws. These flaws have now become quirks. Not quite as bad. I'm confident in them. I am what I am. I am who I am. And you have confidence in that statement, and confidence and courage fuels that too.
Yeah.
We see the courageous hero portrayed as being physically strong and resilient, and they seem to overcome any dangers that they face. They run into situations that are almost impossible, but they still save the day. But there's another one that we see practice in the world, and it's also pretty common, and it's just as powerful though, is that of the moral courage. Standing up for what you believe in, standing up for what's right, finding the courage to stand up for yourself when everyone seems like they are against you, standing up to your boss, or standing up to someone who's bullying someone, or standing up to someone you respect. It's very hard to do that, because even our heroes, even the people that are those great hearts in our life, sometimes they slip, sometimes they mess up, or sometimes they are wrong. And it requires a lot of courage to stand up to them and let them know, hey, what you're doing is wrong.
And very often, more often than not, when it comes to moments where courage is needed, it'll never be something you're anticipating unless it's maybe confronting a boss about something that's been going on. But very often, those moments where we're truly challenged, when we're triggered, when something happens and we need to act, those are some of the most important moments, because that's when you can really start working with yourself to build your courage and your strength.
Courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Do you know who said that?
No, that's good though. Who was that?
Mark Twain. Let's do a practical ways to develop courage. Name your fears. Write down what you fear and why it scares you. Identifying fears reduces their power over you. Take small risk. You ever heard someone tell you that? Take small risk, Michael? Build your courage by starting with manageable risk and slowly increasing your comfort zone. I think I've probably told you a few times.
I can think of a few times where you have in the middle of things,
yeah,
where I'm going through it, and
take a little risk, because you know what that brings us into? Faith. You take those small risks, Build confidence and courage. Build courage
Yeah.
by starting with more manageable risk and slowly increasing your comfort zone. Face fear in visualization. Now, if you're somebody who suffers from severe PTSD or any kind of other visually triggering conditions, maybe sit this one out unless you consult your helper. But picture yourself successfully confronting a fear. Imagine the sensations, actions, and emotions in vivid detail.
Well, I'll be honest, I haven't even thought about that, but I think this would be such a great exercise because the more time you can spend with your fear, the more time you can process it and prepare yourself to handle it. I think envisioning the things that we fear and confronting those and how we can go about them can help us prepare for the best outcome we could provide for ourselves.
In part one of this, we talked about fear versus caution. Caution is a good thing. Caution keeps us from walking out in front of buses, and caution keeps us from touching hot things. Fear feels like a friend and a natural kind of thing that happens that signals danger. But for us that's caution. Fear, when it's left unchecked, paralyzes us. It keeps us from moving forward, from growing. It creates stagnation. It makes us unable to do anything. And
Uh-huh.
fear is no friend to us, and it's no consort. It will save it will quote unquote save you from this or that, but trust me, it's not doing it for your own good. It's doing it in a way to gain control over you. So
One
courage,
interesting thing I want to add. Oh, go.
yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Keep going.
I was just going to say courage transforms fear into action. It helps us. We see fear, we have fear, I have fear, you have fear, everybody has fear. But when we apply courage, it doesn't erase fear, it just helps us stand up in the face of it. So it transforms that and allows us to take action by channeling. And for me, it channels it more like into awareness.
Yeah. Some studies they've even shown. So you look at animals like geese or deer when they're in the midst of a fight or running for their lives and they shake out their bodies and it's discharging this energy from the fear they go through. And for many out there, if you struggle with fear, when we go through things that instill fear in you and you begin to bottle those emotions up, you begin to not process that fear or have resolve after with that fear, it becomes harder and harder to take those steps necessary to feel the courage you need handling situations. And so, kind of like what Justin is saying, the more action you can start taking in the face of that fear, the more you can retrain your nervous system to not let that fear hijack your system. The more you stand up for yourself, the more you stand up to the issues in your life, the more self trust you will cultivate, and the more courage you will cultivate, more confidence you will have. And so that's just one thing I wanted to add at the end of that.
That's right. It's true. We've talked about before how our bodies, the way they're physically built, the way our physiology is, where we have these triggers and our body doesn't know that it's our boss yelling at us versus getting trampled by something much larger or being eaten by something, right?
You know,
We're not quite there yet. We haven't quite evolved to where we know the difference, where our body's fight or flight systems understand the difference between being honked at in traffic and losing your mind to getting bushwhacked by a cheetah or something. So they're going with this.
our bodies don't know better. That when fear is active in our systems, it can very much over exaggerate the threat that is ahead of us because our nervous system doesn't know better from a bear chasing us in the woods and a boss who's having a bad day and needs confronted about his attitude towards his employees.
Right. Both require fear though, right? Our ancestors, as far back as you can go, and we know this because you and I are sitting here, so somebody survived. At least two sets of people survived because here you are and here I am. And I know there's lots of people out there. So we know that they employed courage, but it's also important to employ courage when being criticized or judged. And those two in the modern world are particularly good at sabotaging our action, right? We have this fear of being judged or criticized. So it prevents us from taking those little miniature risks that I was talking about before, or taking even bold action. We have to remember that the triggers will come, but we have to deal with those appropriately for what's in front of us. Yes, I feel like I'm going to die, so I must fight or fly, but it's just my boss yelling at me, or a customer criticizing me, or me criticizing myself, maybe. Let's do a reflection exercise. The shadow of fear. Write about a situation where fear held you back. Could be anything, be small or something big. It's up to you, because only you are going to read it and only you are going to get something out of it. How would you handle it differently today with the knowledge that you've gained? Our journal prompts for courage. What does courage mean to you? And how has it shaped your life? Or how can it shape your life for the better in the future? Reflect on a moment when you've acted courageously. How did it feel? I bet it felt awesome, by the way. And what did you learn? What fears do you need to face today? And what steps can you take to overcome them? You might like this one, Michael. You're kind of an analytical guy. This is our true exercise for courage. Write down a fear and break it into steps. It can be any fear. Create a plan to face it gradually. Identifying supportive actions that you can take along the way.
It's kind of elaborating on what you were talking about earlier, because the more we can break it down, the more we can make it bite-sized pieces, the easier it'll be to take the necessary steps, no matter how small or how large. Cultivate the confidence to address the courage to address this thing in our lives.
Here's a bonus one. I think it was in the last episode, or maybe the one before that, where we talked about writing letters to ourselves. Remember that? The courageous letter. Write a letter to your future self, describing how you overcame a current fear. Seal it and revisit it later to reflect on your.
Dang. Yeah, that's good.
And only open it once you've overcome that fear. Because I don't want you getting discouraged and going, oh, see, I couldn't do it. Yes, you can. Yes, you can practice. You can do anything. As long as you practice, practice, practice. You should be doing training for everything. For your mind, your body, your emotions, and your spirit.
Well, and with that practice, I mean, there's that one quote out there where if you dedicate just 18 minutes a day to practicing a new skill, 1 year you will have spent 100 hours practicing this, and you would be better than 95% of the people in that field.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple affirmations for courage, too, while we're at it. Courage flows through me, even in times of uncertainty. And I'll actually restate that. Courage flows through me, especially in times of uncertainty. I embrace challenges as opportunities for growth. I am fearless in pursuit of my purpose. So before I get your final words on courage, if we move on to justice, I just wanted to say courage is a constant companion on this path of light. It pushes us to move beyond comfort. It pushes us to face our shadows, and it empowers us to make decisive action in service of what matters most and of what is right. By embodying courage, we inspire others and create ripples of change in the world. Any final thoughts on courage before we move on?
No, I think we covered all around courage. Such an important thing, which is why we spent so much time with it. But practice, practice, practice.
Practice, practice, practice. That's absolutely right. Justice. This one can be pretty tricky, really tricky, especially if you don't employ mercy. You don't understand mercy. Justice can be really tricky, and it can really turn sour quickly. Justice, in a nutshell, for most people, would be the pursuit of fairness and truth. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, 100%. I feel justice is at the heart of every individual, as is courage. But justice is something that takes true evaluation, because we can get lost in the details of what we find to be just.
Justice is the heart of everything human beings know. It's the heart of every civilization, right? Without justice, civilization doesn't exist. Without justice, family units fall apart, because somebody's going to wrong somebody, whether on purpose or not. And justice is at the heart of every light worker, every luminary, every person who walks the path of light. But justice requires work, right? Courage becomes a state of being, but justice is a constantly evolving and constantly changing and constantly growing into different things and different meanings. And it's certainly different no matter everywhere you go. Justice seems to be a little different, whether that's right or wrong.
Well, there's so much truth to that. I mean, you look at different championing a cause. I mean, you have to constantly be evaluating things as they go through their changes because what once was a just cause could change into something malicious. So I think you stated that perfectly. The justice is not something that is a set in stone, this is how things are, but is constantly molding to the environment, to those involved, to the cultures, there's so many variables when it comes to this.
It helps in our ethical decision making, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
our moral alignment. It tells us how to handle conflicts. It's what happens after we defeat an enemy or defeat a wrong. It's a harmony that emerges when fairness and truth align with our actions. It's the foundation of peace, trust, and order, which we really need in societies, right? For civilizations, it certainly is the foundation for peace and trust and order, because if there were no justice, we would tear each other up in the streets. There wouldn't be any kind of systems that serve man. It would just be man serving themselves over and over again into
Yeah. What if you look at the systems? I mean, kind of like what you're talking about with justice being so adaptive with the trajectory of things. I mean, most great civilizations when they start as something built for the people. Look at America, built for
Mhm.
the people. And then it went from trying to create equality for all to then becoming a powerhouse, and slowly the money gets pushed into a select group, like what happens throughout civilization. And it's a constant need to evaluate these systems and find ways to adapt it to the new modern day in a way that is beneficial for all and not just for the few.
It helps us find equitable solutions for the things that we deal with, things we face. We've said it before and we'll say it again. Life is not fair. Fairness doesn't always play a part in where we start off at or who we are, where we're born, the circumstances and conditions we're born into. But justice seeks to make those things equitable. They seek to establish foundations for everyone to have more of a fair shot. That's what they seek to do. They don't always hit the mark. They don't always do that. But these are things that we should be developing inside too. When we think of justice as far as us individually, it should also be our foundations for peace, trust, and order. So it's what happens in society where we see society. And usually when society finally falls, it's because justice has been abandoned in one way or the other.
Yeah, there's so much truth to that statement.
Justice, I said, is work, right? It's not a state of being so much as like courage. It requires work because it requires discernment, a lot of awareness, integrity, and courage. See what we did there? To defend what is right while remaining compassionate and merciful and merciful. So as we explore justice and how we embody it in daily life, where we try our best to balance fairness with compassion and stand firm in the face of injustice. And we do this through reflection, discernment, awareness, and we really try each day just a little more to cultivate a deeper understanding of what justice is as a force for light, but also a force for transformation. So justice as a reflection of justice mirrors the light by restoring balance. That's what it seeks to do. Now, I want to put a caveat here. Not everything I say is not what's actually happening, but what I'm saying is what should happen when justice is embodied into your path and into your life. And so, yes, I know justice doesn't always seem to restore balance in the world or truth or harmony. So, but that's what we seek to find. And this is why we always say it starts with us first. Incorporate justice, this idea of justice inside first, and let it flow outside. But we could sit here for hours and talk about all the failings of justice, and not just our little country, but in every country. And not just in every country around now, but in every country that it's ever existed, every kingdom that's ever existed, every tribe that's ever existed. I mean, this is a human problem. Justice is a good human idea, and it has its backing by the law of nature, and it has its backing by these omnipotent sources that we all tend to believe in, most of us. But it's in the applications where we have trouble, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, kind of like you're saying, how it is throughout history that if you look at how society has grown, how it's built itself up and broke itself down and has constantly remade itself, more and more we get closer to a just society. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but without justice and love, peace will always be a great illusion. And as we are going through society now, it's easy to find all the injustice. But as we look at how much justice is there, how much God, the universe, is trying to balance things out, yes, we might tear ourselves down again, but we will build ourselves back better than before because we always have. And I feel that is the evolution of society. We are slowly building into a culture that is driven for the whole and not for the individual. And it's a beautiful thing when you start looking for how that is the path of humanity and how we have come so far in justice, courage, in responsibility, and respect.
You know, it's interesting because we talk about justice. I was talking about justice as a mirror, that justice mirrors the light by restoring balance, truth, and harmony. And you were just talking about how the things outside of us turn out to be not quite that. We seem to be moving in that direction at times, but then other times it seems like we go backwards 10 steps. But I wonder, and this is not going to be a very popular thing for me to say, but I'm going to say it because it is important for us to be truthful with each other. How many of those have looked inside and seen where their scales of justice lie?
Oh, man, I could go on a tangent with this. I mean, this is one of the hardest parts when you start doing this work, when you start taking that courageous moral inventory of the life you've led. We do our best to not be the bad guys in our own story. And often that can lead to us having a lot of blinders up to our actions and our deeds and the pain we cause others because we're so lost in looking at the scales elsewhere. Hold on. Let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eyes. That's necessarily where I was going. Back. But the Bible talks about the beam in your eye. So often we are trapped in hypocrisy because we refuse to look at our own wrongdoings while accusing others. And so many people I feel suffer in this world. There is so much suffering that is caused because people are constantly running from their scales. You look at Egyptian mythology, and when you went to the underworld and you met with Anubis and he would put your heart and weigh it against a feather, that was what determined where you went in the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't because of your moral dealings. It wasn't because of all the good you did or all the horrible things you did. It was how heavy is your heart by the time you pass. Because when we do live a life outside of justice, when we are determined to declare justice from others and not of ourselves, that weight gets heavier and heavier because our soul knows. Our
Mm-hmm.
soul knows when we do not step up. And the more we run from the scales of our own justice, the more we're going to take on those masks and do all we can to compensate for it, which is just going to lead to more pain and suffering in the world because no lessons are being learned. I think I summarized what I was going for there.
There's something I always tell my would-be knights. This is something that I expect from them as it concerns the agreements. Now, this may take them a lifetime to get to, but it's important for them to always have this in the back of their mind as they're out there doing their thing. Every person we encounter, we have a duty to teach them courage by showing them how to overcome fear. We offer them mercy by giving them a hand up. We guide them to have faith in themselves by teaching them how to find who they are and what they are truly capable of. Be generous in your time. Be generous in your words towards them and with your time spent on them. Help them realize justice by judging them fairly. Be the example of nobility in your dealings with them and others involved. Do these things and you will have given them hope. And by giving them hope, you now have a potential ally and friend, a friend that you may need someday to help you find hope and to help you find a way back to all of these agreements. Justice is a ton of different things. Justice is an important pillar in everything we do on this path because it forces us to weigh fairness, and it forces us to look at people and look at things as having inherent value and worth, if nothing else. Those who disregard justice and fairness are no warrior. No matter their prowess, no matter their intellect, or no matter their position or title, their lack of respectable moral standard makes them nothing more than a brute. Our sense of justice reflects who we are. It is the reason we tell the truth, defend those in need, give generously to the poor, and refute all forms of bigotry. Justice provides the measure by which we determine good from evil, and ultimately determines our sense of honor. Justice is the bedrock of every successful culture and civilization. In everyday life, we uphold justice by being fair to everyone. These civilizations will not exist in any significant or meaningful way without the systems of justice in place to ensure fairness, adjudicate disputes between people, help ensure the ethical and humane treatment of people by their respective governments. And for the Luminari, we agree that we shall do our best to shield others from suffering needlessly, that we will do our best to bring an end to the suffering caused by others and protect those unable to defend themselves. For us, justice is not just retribution, but an understanding that someone must stand up against those who harm. Justice is more than just being a barrier, though. It's about being a proactive force against those who harm others. Where a Luminari stands, others should know that justice will be done. Luminari act with justice in mind, which is in opposition to evil for the sake of good, but not in vengeance, which is just punishing only for the sake of causing suffering. And that kind of takes us into the anti-virtue of justice, which is vengeance, which we'll get into in a much different setting. Justice covers a lot of things, and for us, like I said, it's one of our pillars of this path, and it's probably the pillar of every light-oriented path because it holds up so many different things, but it also requires us to always be proactive. Again, we talked about courage before this. Courage becomes a state of being, and it's always there. It's always there pushing us along and helping us achieve things. But justice requires a ton of awareness and a ton of proactivity.
It's the truth, though. I mean, as we go through life and we see wrong being done in the world, our hearts go out to these situations. Unless you're really one cold person, it is heartbreaking to see injustice in the world. And so the more we cultivate this, the more we evaluate our stances in the areas we are just, the more we take action in the face of injustice, the more that defines our character and our paths as knights.
It really does. And some will use justice in terms of protecting order and community to make sure that there is peace and prosperity. And like I said before, not everyone will agree on this agreement's application to the path and how it's applied to situations that we all encounter, because some will hijack justice politically, some will hijack justice religiously, some will hijack it in other ways. One thing is for sure, no matter how we apply justice, no matter how you decide that it applies to your path, the situations you encounter, ensuring that justice done, it kind of goes back to people who are very emotionally invested in seeing quote unquote justice served. If you're doing that, you should stop and reevaluate
Right?
what it is you're looking to accomplish out in the world.
One of the best things you can use as a guide when it comes to justice, be the change you want to see in the world. When you see a lot of these people who are corrupt and push justice as some kind of moral high ground, look at their character, look at their history. How do they show up in the world, not just in front of their peers that they are making their movements, but in their personal life, in their contributions to society? And also, same with you. When you want to take a stance, what are you trying, what is your goal? What are you trying to provide in the form of justice for the things that you are passionate about and want to see change in? Is it being driven by emotion? Is it being driven by pain? Is it being driven by anger?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you feel a sense of clarity where you know what you are pursuing is right and for the greater good?
As far as our temple goes, our application of justice, we want people to be free. to live their lives on their terms, as long as they're not hurting anyone or preventing others from enjoying their freedoms as well. We also want to see people face punishment, though, when they cause harm to people, when they do things that cannot be ignored. So that's really where we come from with this. And like I've said many times over the years, ensuring that quote unquote justice is served or justice is done sometimes comes with outcomes and punishments that are terrible. In seeking justice and what is right, we should always, and my students must always, make sure that humanity, compassion, mercy is always employed in their application of justice, because that is the teachings. That is of the light. We must balance things and harmonize with justice and to ensure that it doesn't become vengeance. Don't lose yourself in the pursuit of justice. Take in and consider what we call the totality of circumstances and only use what is necessary. Always go in with a peaceful heart and a clear mind, and do not try to quote unquote serve justice when you're emotionally attached or too close to an issue or its outcome. That's very important too.
Yes. Well said. I didn't even think about that, but there's so much truth to that, because when you are so passionate about something, it is so easy to get stuck in that tunnel vision of wanting to see a cause to fruition, and you're going to miss all the destruction that could be happening around, as well as the destruction to yourself. When you are too passionate, when you are too attached to an outcome, it can lead to darkness.
It
There's
does.
an axiom for that.
There's a couple axioms for that. Heather's not here to put money in the jar. We'd be rich today. Look, seek justice, but love only mercy. Very few people at the center of our teachings. I will say this again and again because it is the truth. It is the fact. At the center of our teachings is the idea of redemption. Very few in this world are undeserving of a chance at redemption. If we serve everyone with compassion, with humility, and mercy, when we do this, they will ultimately be the judge themselves, of themselves. It's not us to judge them. It's us to serve. It's up to us to serve them. Fairness. When we think of justice, we also think of fairness. As we've said, fairness is essential when we are talking about justice. And as I've said before, we are not all born with equal footing, but we should work towards a system where people get a chance to pursue a life where we have the opportunity to benefit equally, no matter when, where, or to whom we're born. All life is considered sacred to us. Let me say that again. All life is considered sacred to us. We should strive to see people as individuals rather than the groups they were assigned to without their consent. Again, things like place of birth, their gender, their skin color, etc. And there should never be a time when another human being is harmed or degraded in the company of a luminary. My knights, my people, my students, me, and those who seek to emulate what we do or become a student yourself, it is very, very, very important foundationally for you to understand this. All life is considered sacred to us. We believe that everyone, with a very few exceptions, deserve a chance of redemption. These things all come together. They relate to each other. So let's talk about fairness, Michael.
One of my personal beliefs is how we are all the same kindred spirit when we are born, and we are conditioned by different experiences, beliefs, temperament's kind of a part of it, but on the whole, we're all these pure beings trying to make the most of this life. And the more we can see ourselves in the eyes of others, the more we can truly love people unconditionally. I heard this practice about a year ago that I try to be mindful of. And it's a little out there, but work with me here. It's treat each person you meet like they are the incarnation of Jesus. That doesn't mean worship them, it doesn't mean do all these things for them, but know that there is God within each person, to give them the respect that is due, to be treated fair and without prejudgments. You can't judge a book by its cover, and so often we do. It's the more we can step out of that, the more we can get into acceptance and non expectation of others and just see people for who they are, the more we can cultivate connection, the more we can cultivate community. And that doesn't mean that sometimes people need to learn hard lessons, but usually at that point, there is quite an established level of trust and relationship that is built. As they say, the scars we carry the deepest aren't given to us by our enemies, but from the people we love the most.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are working with others, when we are going through trying to be these examples, and we encounter people every day, the more we can treat them fairly and with due respect, the more we're going to cultivate a safer space for everyone to be more authentic and more courageous. There's my kind of 2 cents on that.
What role does judgment play in justice? What I mean by that is where we don't seek truth, we just make assumptions and we just judge the book by its cover without really using any kind of discernment, without using any kind of awareness or really wisdom.
Yeah. Well, I think judgments are one of the most dangerous things to justice because the more judgments we have, the more we narrow our vision of seeing what could be beyond those judgments when we are pursuing justice.
We do have to make certain judgments, common judgments in our lives every day. That's not the judgments we're talking about here. We're talking about looking at a person or a situation on the surface alone and making an absolute determination based on factors that may or may not be relevant to what's actually happening, or doing that to a person, or doing that to a group of people, right? Those are the kind of judgments we're talking about. Not seeking truth, but just using assumptions on the surface. Really, the best way to do this, if we're able to, some situations happen very quickly. We don't have time to do some of this stuff, but we're talking about, normal situations here. Try to examine all the sides of something or of a person. Try to get to know them before you judge them. Be open to information, especially the stuff that challenge your views. That's how you're going to grow. We don't grow in a nice fluffy little bathtub with bubbles and rubber duckies. Sometimes we have to grow in some really, really tough, challenging, uncomfortable situations. How do we champion fairness? And how do we balance mercy? I'll give a point and then maybe you can throw one in there too, Michael. Advocate for fairness in everyday situations. You will find plenty of things to practice on out there if you're looking for it, I promise. Correcting misinformation, that's a really big one these days. A lot of misinformation everywhere. Or if you feel comfortable enough and you know the parties, mediate conflicts. But how else can we champion fairness in small ways?
Oh, and I've seen that too. No, I think when it comes to fairness and mercy, I mean, the more we can operate from a non-biased opinion and look at things from as many perspectives as possible, the more clarity we can cultivate, the more understanding we can cultivate, and the greater our judgments can be as far as how to pursue justice in any given situation, because the devil's in the details.
Mhm.
And the more we can seek to understand something, the greater understanding of how it operates in all its moving parts, because nothing's ever as simple as black and white.
Yeah, that's a good one. How about some journal prompts for justice? What does justice mean to you, and how do you demonstrate it in your daily life? This is where you're going to start to see, and after listening to us, that there may be some slight differences on how you see justice and how you apply it. Reflect on a time when you stood up for fairness. What challenges did you face and what impact did your actions have? And how can you balance fairness with compassion in moments of conflict? When you're challenged, that one is that's actually a good thing to put on all three of them. Let's restate them. What does justice mean to you, and how do you demonstrate it in your daily life, and how do you apply it when you're challenged by someone? And just add that to each of those. So the exercise for justice that we're going to go with, we call the observer's seat. Choose a recent event where fairness was challenged. Write about the event from the perspective of all involved. Practice seeing the situation through multiple lenses before determining what justice would look like. That's a really good one because it forces you to practice your empathy also.
It's exactly what we were just talking about. That's perfect.
Here's a few affirmations for justice. I stand for justice, even when it's difficult. I balance strength with mercy and courage with grace. I trust my inner wisdom to guide me toward justice. Do you have any final thoughts on justice before we move on to mercy?
No, kind of the point I made with courage still applies to justice. It's about doing what is right and not what is easy. And that's one of the greatest skills you can cultivate on this journey, is to distinguish between the two, because often our minds will try to find the easiest path, the path of the least resistance, but the magic happens on the other side.
Justice is not just an external pursuit, it's an internal practice of aligning actions with values. By living justly, we cultivate fairness in our relationships, integrity in our decisions, and trust in our communities. As you walk the path of Ashla, let justice be both your guide and your legacy. There are definitely worse things to be remembered for than being just, I would say. Wouldn't you agree?
I think that'd be a great thing to be remembered for.
I hope I'm remembered for that. If nothing else, you know what? He was a fair guy. He always told like it was, but he was always fair. Never took sides without knowing all the information first, because you do have to take sides sometimes. Make sure you have all the information first. All right, now we're moving on to mercy. But before we get into that, there's something I want to say about the agreements. Right action or righteousness is not the same as self-righteousness. Okay? It's a very important distinction here that I want to make before we get any further. I probably should have said this at the beginning of the series, but we're going to say it now. Right action is where one has integrity in both actions and words, having enough forethought to do what you can to work toward the best possible outcome for everyone involved in whatever it is. It's not taking shortcuts for the sake of expediency. Self-righteousness is forcing action or compliance on people without integrity. Understand that. Every word or action needs to be justified by other words or actions. If you have to justify what you're doing, then you're probably not doing the right thing. Take the sort of action that does not require your justifications later or ever. If you are doing and saying what is right, you will not need to justify anything. Self-righteousness, in my opinion, is a cancer to true virtue, because our place in this world is to alleviate suffering whenever possible and wherever possible. If you do your part, you're saving the world for the person whose pain may be lessened by your compassion and mercy. So we're going to breach off into mercy. We're going to now mercy, and we've talked about mercy a lot already so far when we were talking about justice, because they really can't exist without each other, right? Not on this path anyway. Embracing compassion for others and yourself. We just talked about how it's very important for those of us on this path who adopt these teachings that we see the inherent worth of others. We're interconnected with each other. To have hateful judgments against one, you're actually judging yourself in a hateful way.
So true.
And all of us have something to heal from. Would you say that's true? I believe it's true.
100%. I mean, a lot of this conditioning we go through in life, when you start getting into the shadow work, which, again, talk to your doctor or your therapist before you jump into this kind of work, but you start to realize many of the things that anger you, that you see in society, are actually traits you wish to cultivate in yourself. Now, you see someone being angry and standing up for themselves, and you get frustrated by the anger they have. Sometimes there may be areas where this person's acting in a very unbecoming manner, but a lot of times the anger you have towards someone is your own secret desire to know how to be angry. Now, you don't think of it like that. That is not how your mind processes that. But as you dive into these parts of you that you have tucked away so that you can show up in the world the way you know how, the more you start to understand these things that trigger you. And kind of like what Justin was saying with mercy, when you have mercy with yourself, when you have mercy with the times you do get upset, those times you get sad, the times you overreact, through mercy can you give yourself true self-love and compassion, and allow yourself not to create these judgments about you that you then restrict yourself that much more later on. Because a lot of times when this happens, it's already because you're restricting yourself and it bottles up and explodes.
Yeah. and you're holding on to more resentment than you can even imagine. You have to release resentment to create space for yourself to heal. And there's an axiom for this: heal yourself by healing others.
Yeah.
You can't do that if you're full of resentment and not wanting to forgive yourself or others. Mercy has this quality. Mercy is an act of compassion that softens judgment. It helps heal wounds. And through all of this work, it restores balance. It's not a weakness. I don't care what all the bad guys and all the cool movies say. It's not a weakness. It is a strength. It's the ability to rise above anger and resentment, to offer forgiveness, but
Yeah.
most importantly, grace. Another agreement that we'll talk about in part 3.
Well, and I think kind of what you're touching on, it's good to have, you have to have mercy with others, but make sure when you are providing mercy, you're doing it for yourself. Now, there are situations where someone realizes the error of their ways. Again, no one is beyond redemption. Give them that mercy, let go of that resentment, and help build that relationship back up. But also be aware of those who are stuck in their ways and not ready for that transition. Give them mercy, but also give that space.
Right. Give the space. Trust but verify. Right. You don't have
Yes.
to. If people screw you over, it happens to every single one of us. And if they've proven enough to you to at least earn the space that you can give them in your life, and once they violate that, then remove them again. It's really easy. And maybe sometimes you remove them forever. No one is beyond redemption. However, sometimes we are not the ones to help them realize that. Because
Yeah.
redemption really only comes from them. We can only redeem ourselves. But if we never give the space for redemption to be had, then redemption will not be had. But it's really a thing of their doing. They must redeem themselves. But if they violated your boundaries, then shoo them away. Send them to someone else who is maybe better equipped or who isn't too damaged by that person to help them. It's okay not to help everyone. We're not here to save the whole world. We're here to empower ourselves so that empowerment may heal the world over time through other individuals.
Yes.
It's something we talk about a lot here. And Michael, you talked about it a lot in a really good way in several shows. Our job is not to save the world.
No, no.
It's to awaken and empower ourselves so that we can serve. And through that service, the world may be bettered over time.
Yes.
Very few of us get the chance to actually save the world. And we must not measure our impact on the world, whether we're saving it directly or not. Empower yourself, awaken, and then awaken and empower others through that chain of events, because we're all interconnected. The world will be saved, if not directly by you, by the interconnectedness of all of us.
It's kind of like what you said with words and actions. The more you begin to live a life that is dedicated to yourself, and I don't mean that selfishly, but the more you take time to become the example you want to see in the world, people will be drawn to you. You will have a magnetism to you because when words and actions align, so does everything else in life. And people will see that. People will feel that. And again, it's not our job to save those who do not want to pursue that path, but at least we've planted a seed at the bare minimum. Because I do believe most people at some point do wake up to enough awareness to want to start walking this path. And when you can constantly be an example of what that looks like, how that not only serves yourself, but serves the world around you just by being you, there is nothing more empowering for you and for others.
Someone is always watching. Someone is always watching, and
You
they're
know?
planting seeds. You may get absolutely nowhere with the person with the knucklehead in front of you. You may get nowhere with them, but someone is always watching. Just remember that. Everything you do has an impact on someone, and that someone has an impact on someone, and that person, and so on and so forth. You get the picture. Mercy reflects the light, and that's the path that we walk here. It reminds us that kindness and understanding are transformative forces. Again, everything we do is potentially transformative for someone else.
Yeah. Or even with those that you can't help. I mentioned it earlier, but planting the seed just by being an example. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of people who struggle with addiction, and it's not your job to save people from addiction. But the more you can give that mercy when they want to get help for their lives, when that time comes, you can open that space up for them to start cultivating themselves and taking the path. And if they slip, they fall, they go back to it, you create that space again. But so many people suffer with addiction in this world, whether it's substances, gambling, porn, whatever. And the more you can have the mercy to have the conversations, but as well as to understand their place in their journey, the more you can create awareness and have justice, have the courage to handle things as they need to be handled in those moments.
Yeah.
Because I think there's many people on here who either suffer with addiction or suffer with loved ones in addiction. I know many I have met on this path that just through codependency have started the awakening process because they can't keep trying to live a life of self-abandoning, too much mercy at the cost of themselves to help the other. I mean, I was through that for years. There's a fine line between giving mercy and letting people go about what they're doing and giving mercy and allowing someone in your life.
Mercy is compassion in action. It's a willingness to forgive when judgment is deserved. We got them dead to rights, man. They deserve the judgment. But it's the willingness to show compassion in that time. It transforms relationships and it opens doors to healing. Again, we all have something to heal from, every single one of us. Mercy is the willingness to forgive when judgment is deserved. It transforms our relationships.
God, that's beautiful.
It opens the door to healing by prioritizing growth over punishment. It really does.
Yeah.
Let's talk about forgiveness, because mercy and forgiveness go hand in hand. Let's talk about forgiveness as liberation. We've talked about this in lots of different ways throughout the episodes that we have done so far, because as we've said, forgiveness oftentimes is removing a weight off of your shoulders that someone else put. But forgiveness is liberation in a lot of ways.
Well, kind of like you brought up with resentment. I mean, when people have trespassed against us and we don't have forgiveness, resentment, anger, all these negative emotions build up within us and we can ruminate. We can be stuck. Forgiveness is just as much for us, if not more so than anything. Because through forgiveness, it's not necessarily acceptance. Okay, I forgive you, come back into my life because you beat me. It's forgiveness is, this is the journey you're on, and I'm sorry for what you have to go through. I can't have you in my life anymore, but I forgive you so that I am free. Because when we don't forgive, it is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Yeah. It's literally like that. Trauma and abuse and these things, they're very heavy. They're very hard to get through, and many of us don't ever get through them, unfortunately. But you're not forgiving what your abuser did to you. You're allowing yourself to release this weight upon you. And if someone, because we do believe in redemption, if someone comes to you and they are seeking forgiveness, because that is the path to redemption.
Yeah.
And this, of course, guys, this is on a case by case by case thing. I can't possibly say this is a good blanket thing for you to practice, because I don't know how bad or I don't know how much you suffered. But I will say this: the path of redemption requires atonement. And if somebody who has harmed you or trespassed against you is seeking forgiveness, that also means they are seeking redemption. And honestly, I believe that a person cannot have full redemption unless they are atoned, and they must work for that atonement. But off my soapbox I go. What I will say is that mercy and forgiveness frees us from the chains of anger.
Yeah.
It allows us space for peace and growth.
100%. Because the more we let these things weigh on us, the more they will taint our perspectives, the more it'll take away from our health and our energy. The more we can liberate these kind of emotions, the more we will be able to make room for new and better things in our lives. The science out there now that shows how anger and repressed emotions like this can literally turn your body against you. Your immune system, your own cells. I think I brought up this study before, but they found that women in abusive relationships, 10 women who spoke up against their abusers and 10 women who didn't speak out about the abuse against their abusers, The 10 women who didn't were, I think it was like 10 times more likely to develop breast cancer than the 10 who did speak up for themselves. Gabor Mate.
Yeah. I'll give you a personal story. I was married once before Heather. And even though I've been married to Heather for 25 years, or 24 years, no, I don't know. We've been together for a long time, well over 20 years. My first wife did some pretty horrible, horrible things to me. And out of respect for her and our situation that I will say I've healed from, moved on from. I won't get into it, but it's pretty horrible stuff. I'm trying to think. It might have been 10 years or more since I had been divorced from this woman, where she called me. My grandmother had passed away, and she called me to offer my condolences, which was a surprise. I hadn't heard from her in a really long time. But she also wanted to ask me for my forgiveness about all the things she did to me. Now, I want you to understand that I had mostly, and I say mostly, moved on from this, because had I not moved on from the things that this woman did to me, Heather and I would not have been together for as long as we have been together. I'll just put it that way. But what I was surprised to find was when she asked me for forgiveness, and of course, I gave it to her because I'd moved on many, many moons before that. There was actually still some stuff hanging on me that I didn't realize. As introspective as I am, as mindful as I am, there was still this a little bit of weight that was hanging on me that was instantly just dissolved. And I actually felt lighter and actually felt better while I was grieving the loss of my grandmother even. It took a weight off of me. So forgiveness is powerful.
I think one important thing to touch on with forgiveness, as well as it's good to want to forgive someone, but thinking about it, saying I'm going to forgive someone, just forgiving someone verbally, that's not how forgiveness works. Forgiveness is you have trauma lodged in your body from a messed up situation. Forgiveness is the releasing, the
Hmm.
acceptance. It is the peace, making peace with our past so that we can move forward. And that takes time, it takes diligence, it takes awareness. I mean, I'm a firm believer when we go through and do this work, when we start healing our past traumas, we have stories we tell ourselves about how events happened. But the story we tell ourselves is the most important part. And as we can discharge the emotions from these events, I mean, that's what therapy's for, right? Reliving these situations so we can bring up those emotions and help them start processing out of us. The more we process it, the more we can change it from a story of a victim to a story of empowerment and self discovery. And that doesn't go for every story, but you get what I'm trying to say here.
Well, it did, and it did. 100% it did. It empowered me. It helped me through my grief. It really did
Yeah.
in that moment. I could sit with her now and have a wonderful meal, have drinks, talk about old times without any kind of pain or any kind of regret or any kind of I had done most of the work before that. But to your point, that act of me telling her over the phone, but really to her face, I forgive you. That really like took it all off of me. Before that moment, I would never sit down with her for a meal. I would never have drinks with her. I would never even communicate. I never even communicated with her at all because there was still something there. Now, as for forgiveness, I didn't even realize I was completely free until that moment. So that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you. Yeah, now forgiveness is something I've been working very diligently on after everything I went through the last couple years, and it takes time. There's this thing called the emotional guidance scale. And for anyone who's never heard of it, I highly recommend looking it up. It's actually also known as the the map of consciousness. Consciousness, yeah. It shows the emotions and the different levels of where you're at. And you have to work into emotions to get to passion, joy, enthusiasm. You have to work all the way through this. You'll notice when you go through something. So at the very bottom of the emotional guidance scale, low vibration emotions. You have fear, grief, depression. That's the bottom level. Then insecurity, guilt, unworthiness. You go up from there and you get to jealousy. From there you get into hatred and rage. You move up to revenge, anger, then discouragement, blame, worry, doubt, disappointment. See how are lighter emotions as you work through them. And the more you process through these emotions in your system, and this goes for all your healing, usually when we're stuck in an emotion, we're stuck at that vibrational level. And if we can learn to process that and level up to the next level, we can slowly work our way up to satisfaction and contentment, hopefulness, optimism, belief, enthusiasm. It's emotions are a ladder, and you can't just jump from hatred to joy. That is just not how we are wired to work.
You can bullcrap yourself enough to believe that that's how that works, but it really doesn't work that way.
Yep. And it doesn't mean you can't have like moments of jumping to a higher emotion, but you will notice you are stuck at a certain level on that scale. So I highly recommend anyone listening to check it out. I'll attach a link to the show page.
We really fall to our lowest level of training, right? Well, you always hear that when something happens. We really fall to our lowest level of healing in this, because I really ran through some of those really quickly. Like, man, I mean, it was days after some of the incidents happened, I was enraged. I'm just going to leave it at that. But you're right.
Well, that was always my thing. I always got stuck. I was never able to process anger a lot growing up because I never felt like it was safe. And it explains why I dealt with so much self-esteem issues and why I was always fluctuating. I got to that toxic positivity where I could feign that optimism, but there was never any growth because it was more keeping my head in the cloud and not watching the steps I was taking that were burning my own life to the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You fall to your lowest level of healing. And that doesn't mean you can't, like I said, we all have things we need to work through. It doesn't mean we can't serve the world. Just remember that you have to work on you too.
Yeah. I've never heard that before, but I love that. We fall to our lowest level of healing. Well, it's like I think back to every hardship I've gone through, and it's like there's so many times that toxic positivity being my saving grace, where it's like I can stay positive through all this stuff. And man, there's moments where life would humble me, and I would just feel like that scared kid in high school again. And it's like, why do I feel so small right now? And it's because I never did much of the work when it came to this stuff because I didn't even know what it was. And now, as I've been going through the healing scene and things keep trying to take my legs out from under me, I see the difference in where I would have fallen before compared to where I fell now. It doesn't mean it's great or I'm graceful or I got complete control over my life, but I can see the progress I've made because again, it's not a race, it's not a competition. All you want to do is be better every day and to see those transformations, man. That's so beautiful. We could do a whole episode on that.
And we probably will. We probably will. A lot of these axioms kind of cover a lot of the stuff we talk. Everything flows together. Isn't it great?
No.
I just want to point out again, as we've been talking about mercy, we've been talking about forgiveness, it does not mean tolerating continued harm or abuse. Set your boundaries while hoping for the best for that person, but maintain your boundaries. Wish them the best. Maintain your boundaries. Don't ever forget that. Forgiveness. We've been talking about this last part of this segment on mercy. We've been talking about self-forgiveness, really. It's really the hardest form of mercy to practice. It really is. I live with someone who, as you guys have met her and you guys have talked to her and she's talked you through some of her things, she really has a hard time with self-forgiveness. And I work really hard to help her get through that. But you need to remember something. Reflect on this. Grace is not for everyone else only. It's for you too. You need to reflect on the need for grace in personal shortcomings also, so you can grow without self-judgment.
100%.
Okay. So for my superstars out there, let's talk about some journal prompts for mercy. Who in your life do you need to forgive, or should you forgive, I should say? And what is preventing you from doing so? Reflect on a time when someone showed you mercy. How did it affect your perspective going forward? What steps can you take to extend mercy to yourself for past mistakes? How about some affirmations before we move on to our final one, faith today? This is going to be a long one, guys. I'm sorry. I'm happy. If you made it this far, give yourself 400 cool points. Affirmations. I forgive myself and others. releasing resentment and embracing peace. I choose compassion and understanding over anger. I allow grace to flow through me, bringing healing to myself and others. So at the end of the day, mercy is an act of love. It restores harmony and opens the door to growth. By extending forgiveness and compassion, we honor the light within ourselves and others. Let mercy guide your actions, turning moments of conflict into opportunities for peace and growth.
No, I'm good. Faith, though, I'm excited for this one. This is one of my favorite ones.
Is this? Oh, good. Good. Faith is a good one. So finally, we come to faith for today. Faith, trusting in the unseen. It's an anchor in uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it's in a higher power or of the self or your life's purpose or your philosophy. It doesn't really matter because it acts as an anchor when things get crazy.
I remember when I first started training under you, and I was going through a really hard time, and we were talking about hope and faith, and I'll never forget you telling me that hope is what the people we want to help have. Faith is what makes us knights, because faith, the difference between hope and faith is hope is praying everything will work out. Faith is knowing it will. Now, I know hope is in the mix here, and there are some parts on hope that are intertwined within this, but faith is the most powerful tool we can have, because through faith, we can truly liberate ourselves from everything that burdens us in life. Faith knowing all things happen for a reason. Faith knowing things will work out. Faith knowing that there is a greater plan at play.
Faith is knowing that it's okay to let go. To let go. We talked about courage being the fuel that drives the agreements. If that is true, then faith is the vehicle, right? It's the vehicle in which we do our work out in the world. It's the work we do within ourselves. We do things because we have faith that we are doing the right thing and that we are making a difference, even if the proof eludes us. It's a very important piece there because oftentimes the proof does elude us. It really, really does.
Yeah. But the more we learn to surrender it to it, I tell you what, that's the thing that's blown me away the most. The more you learn to let go and just trust the process and trust that things are unfolding for the greatest good, the more abundance you will find in your life. And that can sound like a major claim, but I think it ties into when you open up that space for things to grow, for us to become more, when you get rid of these emotions that are weighing you down, these circumstances that are weighing you down, you learn to accept and just move forward to the best of our abilities. The greater God in the universe will show up for us and try to create something grander than we could even fathom, because in the end we got great imaginations, but nothing's greater than what can be conceived with the energy of everything.
Yeah. Faith is defined normally as something like complete trust or confidence in something or someone. That could be faith in a god or gods or goddesses or whatever, the force, your mentors and teachers, your friends, your family, yourself. Should always have faith in yourself, by the way, first. To have faith in all or any of these things means to have complete trust and confidence in them. That's why I say have faith in yourself first. Because if you can have complete confidence and trust in yourself, then the sky's the limit. When we have faith, we tend to no longer question anything anything kind of chaotic in our day-to-day lives until they're tested. Our faith is tested every single day. Our faith in ourselves, our faith in others, our faith in our religion, our faith in whatever. It's tested in one way or the other. It could be something little or it could be something big. When we have our faith tested, when we interact with the world, some will see this as a bad thing and they'll kind of clam up and they'll stand firm and steadfast against whatever comes their way without sacrificing their faith, even if it means locking themselves into a pattern, a box, a dogmatic view, a prison, really, shutting out entire groups of people for fear that they will challenge them. I love being tested, not because I think I'm going to win, but because it offers me a choice to evaluate my faith in a way that Is it really serving me? Or do they have a point? Should I seek to put my faith in something else?
Yeah. I mean, what was the Stoic quote? Change is nature's delight. We all seek to keep things as predictable as possible. We crave consistency in our lives, and change means we have to change. We have to adapt. And I'm right there with you. I dreaded change most of my life, but the more I've gone on this journey, the more I welcome it. Because anything that challenges me is nothing more than something to help me become more. And it doesn't mean I'm going to handle it great. It doesn't mean it's not going to be a struggle. But the more I get presented with these opportunities, the greater the opportunity for me to become a better person is.
Now, others, when tested, will quickly waver and they'll fold, like in the face of this perceived adversary, right? And this challenge. They kind of quickly realize that they have false faith in whatever or whoever it may be. Those who do this are quick to abandon their faith and often feel lost and defeated. I think that describes many folks I've come across, or those who are attracted to my service. They come to me and I find in them that they have lost faith. Usually faith in themselves, because that's really where the foundation of faith is. It's in faith in ourselves. And then we find faith in other things that are worthy of our faith and our attention and our love and our devotion. So these folks often search endlessly for these things or people who will fill the emptiness that they perceive or that they find within them. And this kind of manifests in unhealthy ways at times, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it's human nature to have almost a void within us. And through a desire to fill that void, I think is what drives humankind to expand, become more, do more. But the more we learn to give ourselves compassion, the more we can give ourselves understanding, the more we can cultivate, I guess, letting go of trying to fill this void outside of ourselves, but that it is fulfilled within with who we are in this moment. The more we can have faith in all things that unfold before us, no matter how difficult they are. Another teaching you gave me a long time ago was how we must be like grass. We can't be like the strong tree. Yes, it's grown to such a size. It is a beautiful piece of nature. But in a windstorm, that tree will bend and break. We must be like grass, where we can flow with the wind, where we can become one with the goings of nature, even if we're stepped upon. Because even if that happens and it dies, it can regrow.
That example is why I would say it's not a void, but it is potential. We have potential to go in any different direction or to fill that potential with something good, something bad, or something harmonious. Which is why it's not for me to judge really what kind of person is better off between the two examples I gave. My preference is that, and my hope is that they fall in the middle, somewhere balanced or harmonious. But I've been at both ends of this spectrum at different points in my journey. This place, this harmonious place, is the healthiest place to be. And really, everyone can achieve this because at the end of the day, Michael, maturity and experience are the keys to this.
I believe that.
Now, this kind of gets us into emotional maturity in a little bit, and I'll explain. Because when we hear or see something that we don't like, or that it goes against what we believe or what we have faith in, having that emotional maturity to hear these things, to experience these things without getting offended or angry, really to approach challenges to your beliefs and faith in a way that allows you to learn to be strong but flexible enough to find that potential lesson or opportunity to grow.
Yeah. I mean, the more we can not hold so rigidly to our beliefs and opinions, which, God, I used to be bad as hell about that, the more we can emotionally disconnect from the need to be right, the more we can open space to cultivate much more wisdom, especially with those who disagree with us, because they have a reason for their opinions too. That extra perspective, so contrasting to yours, could help you create such a greater picture of what could be the best course than just rigidly holding to your beliefs and expectations.
Well, how can you serve them fairly if you don't understand where they're coming from, right? We must approach this path with fairness in mind. And to do that, we must be flexible. We We got to have faith that is strong enough but flexible enough to withstand the oppositions, the storms. There is a certain flexibility to be had when encountering things that are in opposition to our currently held beliefs. There's also like 4 or 5 axioms for this that tell us to be flexible, that tell us to expect opposition, but also to embrace opposition so that we can learn to grow and be more flexible. Don't remove yourself from the fray and chaos of life. If you do that, then you are a servant to none. Roll up your sleeves and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. It's faith that helps us face our boogeyman. Faith has a way of helping us past those weaknesses that we may perceive in ourselves. Faith has a way of keeping us going in the face of unbeatable odds. Be strong in your faith, but not so that you become brittle, as you were talking about. Be strong in your flexibility. This way, you'll be able to withstand the storm without being destroyed and broken once it passes.
Yeah, it's so true though, because I'll admit, when I started this journey, I was so determined to help others. I brought up a friend of mine that I was helping her and her kids, and I was at my lowest point. I was just trying to pour everything I could into this family to help them get through their situation. But I was burning alive in that process because I was not showing up for myself. I was not validating my own experience. And through doing that, I mean, so much more negative emotion poured over in the assistance I had. And as much as I had great intentions, without helping myself first, I was only able to, without helping myself first, I was not able to provide true, authentic support. And in turn, it destroyed that relationship to a degree. It was a very mutual thing on what destroyed it, but just like Justin's saying, you have to take care of yourself first. If you are broken, bleeding, and burning, put yourself up, clot up those wounds, take care of yourself, because you can't fill anybody's cup from an empty cup. And if you do, they get all the grime at the bottom.
You talked about earlier how all these agreements run themselves into each other, and they really don't work alone. They must be interconnected, and they are. We're going to shift this to looking at faith as a foundation of hope, courage, and resilience. It is the belief in something greater than ourselves. So we talked about instilling and empowering and awakening ourselves, but then there's also the faith that we have that is a belief in something greater than ourselves, a force, a purpose, or destiny, whatever you want to focus on. These things also guide us through uncertainty. And it doesn't require proof. It calls for trust in the unseen. It reminds us that the light continues to shine even in moments of darkness. There's like 30 axioms for that, probably. There are different levels of faith here, too. Having faith in ourselves kind of takes us back to our training and our studies and the things that we have found to be true. But now we're transitioning into a faith that is something greater than us, the cosmos, the universe, God, whatever it is, the force, whatever it is.
100%. I mean, I feel all major faiths go down the same path, which is to truly surrender unto God or the universe or whatever path it is, to truly lay your burdens at the feet of the creator in your eyes, so you can be liberated to live your best life. Same goes for the things you've done wrong in your life. I mean, they talk about Jesus dying for your sins, and on the cross he said, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do." What was the meaning of that? It was him saying that people who don't start on this path live from a place that is of control and not of faith. It is a path of trying to change the world around them to feel whole inside, next to feeling whole inside because of their faith, because they know they are doing the best they can, that they can boast in their weakness.
That they can be redeemed, given grace. It's not a race. We all start at different points, right?
No.
Faith is not blind optimism. It is a conscious choice to trust in life's unfolding, even when the outcome is unclear. There's a few axioms for that.
Yeah.
It provides stability when external circumstances seem unstable, when chaos reigns.
Yeah.
Let's see if you've been pretty good at guessing who said the quotes. I'm going to throw you a curveball. We'll see if you know your stuff. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. And I'll know if you're Googling it because you type really loud.
I don't know who said that quote.
Martin Luther King Jr. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. And this
Oh, that's
this
beautiful.
kind of circles us back to talking about fear again. Faith helps us move from fear to confidence. And if we mix in some courage in there, then the sky's the limit, right?
Yeah.
Especially when the evidence is lacking. And it does often. It's having faith that there will be a solution, even if you can't see it. Having faith that somebody has your back. All you have to do is trust, especially when the evidence is lacking. It builds resilience and inspires action, even amid uncertainty. Courage fuels that.
The more you can let go, the more you can just trust the process, the more you'll be surprised what opens up for you.
You said something earlier. The biggest leap you've taken on this path has been learning to let go. On a scale of 1 to 10, and if you can explain this to us, how much more free did you become once you learned to let go versus where you were?
Oh, it's been night and day. I used to struggle with such bad anxiety, and I still have my moments. It's not, again, this is never a flip of a switch.
Mhm.
But the more I practice letting go and letting God, the more I've done this, it has been so liberating. The moments of joy I've been able to experience, and in turn, the things that have fallen in our path, me and my fiancés, have just been unreal. I was, when my significant other passed a couple years back, we wanted to go to Puerto Rico. And we were going to make the trip happen. We were going to take her son for his graduation, and she passed away right before that, and we didn't get the money together for it. And I kept wanting to. I kept trying to figure out how to get out there after she passed because I wanted to go out there for her. And I finally stopped trying to do that. And last year, I randomly had a friend hit me up. Hey, you want a ticket to Puerto Rico? And bam, something that I wanted to do so bad. I gave it up to the universe, and it brought it right back to my lap. And I went out there. I had the time of my life. I was out there for 2 days and did everything I could have wanted to do out there. And I mean, that's faith. I look at, oh, there was a house my parents were looking at getting growing up, and they wanted to buy this house. And things, they started pushing through, and it wound up being too much. And so they were looking at other houses, and they went to close on another house. That fell through. And it was devastating. But then they got contact about the original house, the house they actually wanted, and they got a better deal than they had been offered before. And it's just beautiful how it played out because when it didn't work out, it worked out for the better.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
It does.
And I do believe that's how the universe works out. That person I was helping out, it was a relationship I really wanted to create and cultivate. And that was a heartbreaking lesson on letting go and attachment. But then I found my fiance who is the perfect match for me. I mean, we've been together for 20 months, never fought. We can talk about anything and everything. We're opposites, yet at the same time, we just match together so well. And it's been magical. And I couldn't have had that if I didn't let go of something that was not for me. And yeah, just in so many areas of my life, the more I've let go, the more greater things have opened up in its stead.
And I can't wait for later on this year to witness you both take the leap of faith. I can't wait for that. I'm actually very excited for that.
Well, thank you. I can't believe it's happening. I never thought I was going to get married.
All right, for my journalers, our journal prompts for faith. What does faith mean to you and how does it manifest in your life? It's important for each of us to have a baseline of where we're at. I'm not going to dictate to you which faith is best. Only you know that. Another one, reflect on a moment when faith helped you overcome fear or uncertainty. And one more, how can you strengthen your faith when faced with doubt or setbacks? You notice, Michael, that a lot of what we do is it all takes a part in combating fear.
I didn't pick up on that as much. I don't think I've correlated that too much in my mind, but I see it now that you say it. Yeah. All of this. Yeah. Not to be confused with caution.
No. I want to point out to everyone, I should have said this in the beginning. If I'm talking a little funny today, it's because I had my tooth pulled. And I don't know if I'm sounding any different or not, but I feel a little self-conscious that I am. So if I am, it's because I had a tooth pulled this week. Which exercise should I go with? Should we do the faith jar? Should we do the trust list?
Trust list.
Trust list. All right, it's a very simple exercise. The trust list. Make a list of past experiences where faith led to positive outcomes. Use this list as evidence to build confidence during moments of doubt and to strengthen your faith. Affirmations for faith. I trust in the unseen and I walk my path with faith. My faith is stronger than my doubts. That's a good one. I act with confidence, trusting that all things are unfolding as they should. All right. Walking by faith, not by sight. Faith is the light that shines in the darkness, reminding us to trust the journey even when the destination is unclear. By nurturing and growing faith, we open ourselves to possibilities beyond what we can see or imagine. As you move forward, let faith be your compass and your strength. Anything to add on faith before we call it a night?
No, though I tell you what, I almost want to get that tattooed. Faith is greater than my doubt. Like that is.
Thank you so much for joining us. We know it was a long one. We thank you for sticking through with us. We have one more part to the series where we'll talk about the last 4 agreements, which are
Hope, generosity, nobility, and grace.
till next time, with gratitude, with love and gratitude, ad lucem.
Ad lucem.